Okay, so what we're going to talk about in this last presentation is some of the new enterprise features that have been introduced in iOS 9.3 and some things that Apple has been highlighting and talking about lately that are very much of interest to us at MobileIron, as well as to many of you who are trying to enable mobile fleets out there as our customers. All right, so we will be talking about stuff that is not yet available in MobileIron product, okay? Except with a few little tricks that we put into place to get these things to work, because we'll have some demos. So the standard disclaimers apply. If you ask me when this is going to be implemented in the roadmap, my answer has to be, I cannot discuss roadmap here, okay? So be aware of that. Okay, so what is interesting about Apple and iOS 9.3? Well, what's interesting here is that for the first time in as long as most of us can remember, Apple introduced new enterprise-centric features or organizationally centric features in a dot release. Typically what Apple has done in the past has gone through the process of announcing a whole suite of features at Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference and then rolling those things out across the year until the next developer conference. Now, what has happened this year, though, with iOS 9.3 is new features that were not discussed at Worldwide WWDC came about in iOS 9.3. So again, it's signaling Apple's real interest in enterprise and organizational use cases and really driving adoption of iOS devices in enterprise, which is good for all of us. Okay, so let's start by looking at the enterprise-centric features. So we'll talk about these, and then we'll do a demo, and hopefully the demo gods will be with us because we're being recorded. And then we'll circle back and finish up talking about the education features. All right? All right, so while there are probably 6 or so really interesting features, I'm going to talk about 4 here. There's a white paper we published. If you haven't seen it, it's on the website that goes into detail on these, on the 9.3 and some of the other features, but we'll talk about it. Starting with the top bullet, the ability to manage and maintain the home screen layout on a supervised device. Now, what this does is it gives you as an administrator the ability to place apps, web clips on either the screen or on the dock. You can create folders and place apps into those folders and put them onto which particular home screen you want to place them on, right? Also, you control the end user experience on the device, right? So this is very useful. We see use cases around kiosk type of deployments, perhaps in retail or in certain healthcare applications, hospitality type of applications, anywhere where you as an administrator want to be able to define what the end user experience on the device looks like and control that experience, assuming of course that there's no personal enablement or anything like that. It is for supervised devices only. Now our second bullet has to do with blacklisting and whitelisting restrictions with respect to applications themselves. Again, these apply to supervised devices. Now, the concept of blacklisting apps is not something that's totally new in the MobileIron world. For example, you can take an app and define an app control rule and take a compliance action around that device if you've got certain apps you don't want people to be installing on their device. So that's been a way that you can approach that. So for example, if you've got corporate-owned restricted use devices, you don't want people to run Facebook on that. In the past, it was very difficult to prevent them from installing Facebook on that. So you would do an app control rule and potentially a compliance rule, certain different kinds of things you might have been able to do. Well, now Apple has said you can define blacklisted apps. These would be apps that would not be allowed to be run on the device. Now, if the user, as you'll see in the demo, has access to the App Store or has a device they've previously had that you've subsequently put this blacklist on, they can install that app on the device. They just won't be able to use it. Okay, so in other words, you're cutting off the use of that device now, or that app. Whitelisting, on the other hand, lets you define a set of apps that are allowed, and only those apps to run on the device itself. So again, this gets to the kind of, while the blacklisting probably has a variety of different applications in corporate-owned scenarios, where you might be wanting to restrict certain apps, maybe personal apps like Facebook or other apps that, shift workers or whatever, you don't want them using during work hours. The whitelisting really is, again, thinking of this in terms of home screen layout and other similar types of use cases, is around these kiosk type of or restricted use type of use cases that might be in place. All right, so that's home screen layout and blacklisting and whitelisting. And as soon as I finish the next two bullets, we'll try to demo and see what those look like, and I'll talk about how you can implement this now. Now, the third bullet has to do with the MDM initiated activation lock. Okay, now how many of you have had the problem where you've got devices that are corporate owned, that may have been issued and then returned with the activation lock locked, right? In other words, someone has turned on activation lock, good, while you own the device and you're using the device. Employee quits, employee gets fired, they return the device to you, and the activation lock is on. You don't have the Apple ID to unlock that device, right? That has been a key challenge, a real difficult use case out there. Now, Apple has been cooperative. You can typically, if you've got the right enterprise agreements in place, you can send them an email and they'll assist you through the process of unlocking it, but it's a highly manual process. So what is really promising here about this is that if you've got a device that is DEP enabled, okay, and so that's the caveat here, is this has to be in the device enrollment program, right? It does not have to be supervised, but if it's in the device enrollment program, the primitives have been put into place such that we would be able to remove the activation lock on that device. And there's a key escrow type of architecture that Apple has defined so that we can arbitrate or work with the Apple DEP program to unlock these devices. But again, thinking about this from Apple's perspective, and actually from the right perspective, because it's a DEP device, it is a device that's institutionally owned. You as the administrator, your organization owns that device. You're entitled to unlock the activation lock because you own the device, right? And because you have DEP in place, Apple knows that you own the device and can validate that you own the device so they can automate this process. This would not be applied to anything that has to do with BYOD or a scenario where the device does not exist in the DEP program. Why? Because, of course, BYOD, activation lock is the individual's right. It's their device. If the device is not in DEP, Apple doesn't know for sure that you own the device, so they're going to err on the side of the end user experience. But interesting anyway. Now, the final bullet I'll talk about, which is kind of interesting, is what happens if you have an institutionally owned device that gets lost or stolen, or something happens to it where it disappears on a train, or somebody drops it in the ocean, or something like that happens. Well, with this new MDM lost mode for supervised devices, and again applying to DEP enrolled devices, what can happen here is that these devices will be able to share their geolocation data with an EMM, even if location services are turned off, okay? But again, the two qualifications there, supervised mode device, and it has to be DEP enrolled. So again, Apple is looking at this as, that's great, we'll share that geolocation data with an EMM because we assume it's a corporate owned or an institutionally owned asset. And again, that's just the Apple philosophy, but still very useful, very interesting, new types of features. All right, now I'm going to invite Toshin Bazaz from the team up. He's going to, we're going to switch over, and we're going to look at the home screen layout and then the black and white list restrictions.
All right.
Here in the
Thanks,
demo.
Jake. So, hey guys, I'm Toshin. So we are primarily going to look at the white listing of apps. This is a new iOS 9.3 feature that was recently announced, and like Jake explained, it's consider whitelisting and blacklisting to be mutually exclusive to begin with. Okay, so we have this particular iPad here that we're going to work with. Okay. So, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going through the DEP enrollment program, and I'm going to launch it. I have everything already keyed in. It's going to install the configuration. Use the code. And that's it. We should be good to go. So what's going to happen is, in the background, the MobileIron cloud solution is going to try to deliver VPP-based apps. And while we are talking, it's actually happening in the background. You know, these apps are getting delivered to this particular iPad, and along with it, I'm also installing a custom config. So what this config basically tells the device to do is whitelist certain apps. And what do I mean by that? Only allow apps which have been mentioned in that particular config file. So I have four apps which have been mentioned in the config file, and you'll see that, you know, all of a sudden, all these apps which are getting installed are actually vanishing. They're being hidden from the user. Don't think that these apps are not getting installed. You know, it's going to be incorrect to say that these apps are actually installed. It's just that they're being hidden from the user interface. So if you actually go in and look, you know, I don't have anything that I can play around with. So I'm basically taking a device right out of the box and enabling my users to run it in a kiosk mode or single app mode or dual app mode. You know, we can restrict the number of apps that we have on this particular device. And this is right out of the box. You don't have to do anything additional on this particular device, open it and go through the setup. So, and the second point that you'll notice is the way I have arranged Safari and the Slack. So this is basically utilizing the home screen layout that Jake was talking about. So we can customize this, we can create folders on pages, we can customize how the pages actually look. You know, if you want certain apps to be on the first page, if you want certain apps to be on the second page, you can actually do that. So it gives you a whole lot of possibilities when it comes to creating these configs. And just to, you know, just a disclaimer, these configs are something that, you know, we as MobileIron don't give out to customers. We encourage customers to use their own, but we do not support them. You know, our support actually does not help you with building these custom configurations or troubleshooting them. These are something that you really should try on a per device basis before actually stretching it out to your entire organization. But it's nothing different than, you know, what we do in the back end. Okay.
Yeah. So just to clarify that point, what we're showing here, we've used some custom XML configurations, and we'll show you this in just a minute, that were imported. Now we're demoing with MobileIron Cloud. You can do this with Core also. The way you set up the XML, you can set up the home screen layout, or you can do the whitelist or the blacklist via that XML. So we're using that custom XML with production code right now, right, to do these, or to show off these iOS 9.3 features. Coming at some point in the future, we'll have instrumentation through the user interfaces of both Core and Cloud, where you don't have to do all this XML work, where you'll be able to do the definitions of the whitelist and the blacklist and the home screen layout. But we wanted to show you how it worked, so we used that custom XML, and that's what Toshin is talking about there.
Yeah, so let's actually jump over to the blacklisting. Okay, like I explained, try to consider these two as mutually exclusive, because if you try to use both, you know, you might get results which are unexpected, because you're taking two configs and applying it to a device. It really depends which particular config was applied to the device last. So that's the one which takes precedence. So make sure that, you know, you treat them as mutually exclusive configs. So switching over to the blacklisting of apps, let's see. All right, there we go. So this is another DEP device. It's a corporate-owned supervised device, but my corporate policy allows me to use App Store. So I'm free to download any app. In this particular case, I'm going to download Angry Birds Star Wars 2. So when I hit install, it should prompt me to enter my Apple ID.
All right, no photographing of the password. Yeah.
All right. Record after 15 minutes, and let's go back. So in the background, what's happening is that Angry Bird is being installed. So you never know as an IT admin what kind of apps will I as an end user install on these. You really want to tighten security if you really are a company which has taken security seriously. You want to tighten apps, and what you see is the app actually got installed, but it just vanishes from your home screen. But if you actually look at the config or the inventory on your core or your cloud solution, you'll actually see the app there. So we have the capacity to detect these apps, and you can take necessary compliance actions. It's not going to take that away from you. It's just that the end user cannot do anything more than that. And that's it. That's the core of blacklisting an app. And like we saw before, you can even whitelist an app. So I think that's it.
Okay. Again, were you going to show the XML?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So while he's setting that up again, so the idea behind the blacklist there and in this demo was just to show the interaction of what happens when an app is actually blacklisted. What we would typically anticipate in a use case around a blacklisted app is probably a scenario where you're not necessarily giving full access to the App Store or something like that on the device. But anyway, it's an interesting way of approaching
that's a good point that you actually brought up. You don't, apart from the settings, you can disable all the Apple default apps if you know the Apple Bundle ID. So you should know the Apple Bundle ID in order to disable these apps from users' usage. Okay, so let's quickly just skim through this particular configuration that I have created. So if you see, it defines, I've commented a few lines. It tells me, okay, my home screen feature starts here. I define certain syntax parameters that Apple defines so that the iOS device can recognize this as a valid configuration. And I'm dictating few apps to be in my dock. So in this particular case, I'm using the mail client that comes with Apple, and then I'm using the App Store, which comes with the device, as two apps which would be docked on my homepage, or for that matter, on any page, right? So going forward, I'm creating pages here. I'm creating folders within pages, and I'm putting apps which are here is FaceTime. Then I'm putting camera within a folder called camera apps. Then going further down, we see I'm creating a second folder, which is Apple default apps. I really hate not using apps on my first screen. It's really a waste of time. So you can bundle these apps together, put them in a box, and forget about it. So you can use the real estate that's there on your device for really meaningful purposes, okay? And then I go ahead, create third folder, and so on. So the possibilities are infinite. You can just go on doing this day in, day out. But what I'm trying to say is you can do this using this particular configuration right now. But like Jake explained, this is something that we are going to look into in both our products. And as of now, using this particular configuration, you can do it on core and cloud both.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you. Okay, so that covers the iOS 9.3 enterprise-centric features. Want to spend a few minutes talking about something else which has gotten quite a bit of press a lot of questions have come in from customers and partners out there having to do with the education-centric features that Apple has been announcing. Specifically, there's some big things around shared iPads. Okay, so you see this here, this shared iPad, this icon, I realize it's quite small from where you've probably been sitting. We were actually hoping to do a demo of it. We just couldn't get it working quite yet. It's a little bit raw, so to speak. But what this does here is, if you can imagine, each one of these little pictures here represents an avatar for a student. It could be the student's picture. The student's able to tap on that avatar, then they'll put in a PIN code that is unique to that user, and at that point, they're going to get their unique environment for learning. That would be whatever work they've been working on, potential learning apps that are relevant to that particular student, obviously their homework, or maybe even exams that might be relevant to them, would be personalized right there on the screen. Then that user would be able to log out. That student, that iPad could be handed to a different student. They hit that screen, and then that student has their personalized learning experience here. So that's the aspiration there of the shared iPad. Now, what does it require? What's required to get there? Well, you have to have a few other things to get to this point. Specifically, there's this new cloud service that Apple has in place, the Apple School Manager. The Apple School Manager is similar to DEP in many ways. It's similar to VPP in certain ways too. But through this Apple School Manager, you're able to create and configure the parameters that go into these shared iPads. Now, one of the things that's really interesting here is you create a managed Apple ID through the School Manager. So in other words, you're creating Apple IDs through this cloud service. Those managed Apple IDs then can be used by students and staff, and you're going to identify those Apple IDs as to what they are. This is a teacher, this is a student, and there are hierarchies that get defined within this Apple School Manager for classroom, for school, district, right? And then owners of the different hierarchies there, and then which devices that they own in their classroom. And then the teacher has the ability to do some customization there on the shared iPad. So, and then ultimately, this app that the teacher is going to be running on the teacher's iPad, this classroom app, they're able to have controls over their shared iPads. They can see what the students are doing on the shared iPads. They could launch content on those iPads. For example, if they were in the middle of a lecture and they go, we want you all to look at this video, at least that's the aspiration, things like that, they could do that. They could also share the students' work via AirPlay and all of these different things. And then of course, through the classroom app, the teacher would have control over the shared iPads, assigning, managing the users, and the content on those shared iPads. So all of this looks for a pretty transformative package that Apple's putting together. Where we get a lot of the interest from, coming in from customers and from our partners, is around this concept of the shared iPad. Because obviously it's really cool as an education feature, but you can also imagine a number of other use cases for shared iPads. Anywhere where you have shift workers, shift worker type environments, whether that be in healthcare, nurses, for example, that might be sharing manufacturing floors, all those kinds of things. At this point in time, all of this is school only though. So, and that's what the way Apple has implemented it. So that's the most common. What other use cases can we imagine for the shared iPad? Right now, school only, because it all works through that Apple School Manager. In a few weeks, Apple will be down the street at Moscone Center for Worldwide Developer Conference, probably talking about iOS 10 and whatever the next Mac OS release is coming. Who knows what they'll say about that. So I'm not suggesting I have any secret knowledge about what Mac is going to, what Apple is going to say, but it would be very interesting to see that they're starting to think about all of these different institutional use cases. So in summary, we look at the use cases that Apple has started to address. Again, extending the functionality there that they've already put into place for organizational use cases shows that they're serious about enterprise, and they're going to continue to push us and push you and push the industry forward, which is good. Interesting potential in the education space. We'll see how this evolves and where we play moving forward there. And so we look forward to working with you on all these different features. Okay.